How's it going?
We keep the code.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Worldwide Wisdom as we take on today the topic, the curious tale of Isaac, Yitzchak, in this week's Torah portion, who cherishes the first anti-Semite, Esau. He cherishes Esau over Jacob. Now, admittedly, this is actually last week's Torah portion, but I haven't gotten past it. I've been sort of working through this in my head for the past couple of days. So I haven't had a chance to work through it in my system. So I'm hoping to work it through with you right now, because it really bothers me. Bothers you too. So we're on the same page finally.
Yeah. Finally.
Yeah, but somehow by the end of the session,
we're not. I'm actually untold this. I'm untold this right now. It's on page 157 in the Chumash. So what happens is that Yaakov and Esau are the two twin brothers, the twin sons of Yitzchak and Rivka. Now, Yitzchak is the first Jew born as a Jew. He was given the gift of being able to bless that was given to Abraham. And who does he want to give this blessing to? He wants to give it to Esau. Esav. Vayhi Esav ish sadeh. He was a man of the field. Yodeh tzayid. He was a hunter. Now Jacob was a scholar. He was sitting in the tents. He was an innocent man. Vayakiv ishtam o yeshev vayhalim. Now, if you got a choice, right? You got the scholar, like the rabbi, and then you got the hunter, the caveman. Which one would you rather want the blessings to descend upon? Right? Isaac chooses Esau. And we're kind of left agape, trying to understand why.
He was the firstborn. What do you mean? Given a choice.
Firstborns didn't do all that well in the book of Genesis. Let's be clear.
But by natural order and right in those days, the firstborn got the blessing, period, and it's short.
Well, Rivka didn't think so.
Oh,
the mother, right? You know, Rashi comes up with this very, very strange explanation of why he wasn't the firstborn. I mean,
First and last.
Yeah, Rashi comes up with this fallopian tube thing. Rashi says that actually Jacob is the firstborn. You saw this in Chayenu?
Yeah.
Chayenu, okay. So what does Rashi say? It says, look, if you have a tube, a fallopian tube, right? And one sperm comes in first, and then a second sperm comes in second, then the first one in is going to be the last one out, because it's a thin tube, right? It's like 770. You walk into 770, like, right? So the first one in is the last one out. Therefore, if Jacob was born second, it means that Jacob was conceived first. I mean, we just rewrote the book on any firstborn in the history of mankind in one fell swoop. I guess it only applies to twins, right? But that was interesting, right? I guess it only applies to fraternal twins, right? Not to identical, right? Yeah. But that's like an interesting trying to squeeze a square into a round hole kind of position, because we're all trying to wonder, why is it that Isaac, the righteous Isaac, chooses Esau? Now, Rivka, we know this is a big story. Rivka deceives her husband by dressing Jacob in the clothes of Esau, right? That's a whole head scratcher right there. Why does Rivka need to deceive her husband? Remember, Isaac was blind, by the way. Why was he blind? Different opinions. One is because Hashem didn't want him to see the wickedness of Esau. Okay. Another one was because at the time that he was offered upon the altar, when he was 37 years old by Abraham, the angels were crying upon him, another head scratcher, and the tears of the angels made him blind. Why were the angels crying? Why were the tears? Why did they have physical tears? Why did the tears of the angels make you blind? They could kill you, right? Maybe it's like sulfuric acid. I don't know. Like what? How do you figure this whole thing out? It's like an interesting situation going on over here. But either way, he was blind. I'm not going to get into that part, that tangent right now. But
also the incense.
the incense of who? Of Esau's wives? Esau's wives. I mean, okay, I don't remember that right now, but interesting. I vaguely remember. But why does Rivka need to deceive her husband, her blind husband, by dressing her son her righteous son in the clothing of the wicked Esau. She could have just,
She read Rashi.
but she could have just criticized him. You know,
Because
good old-fashioned Jewish wives. You know, she could have just said, "You're wrong," right? And this is how you're supposed to do it. Elbow, right, Rob? She could have just, right?
How about having a discussion with her
She,
husband?
exactly. What about a conversation?
because
She could have said,
women
"Can we
are-
talk about this?"
They're on a higher spiritual plane.
Who was?
Women are. You've
Oh,
said that.
Woman's
lots of times.
intuition.
And her intuition was. that-
Well, she could have explained that to her husband.
Yeah.
So he would never-
What does your
No,
wife
because-
do when she feels that you're wrong? Did she ever feel that you're wrong?
What time is it now?
So
Oh, wait, I didn't see the-
does your wife ever does she ever when you're wrong, does she, turn the world upside down in order to deceive you, or does she just tell you straight up?
She was a prophetess, wasn't she? So she saw.
But
She saw it all.
She saw like the
She saw
wickedness of where she lived, and saw what the hidden wickedness of Esau. She saw through him.
So she sees through Esau. Now,
Right.
bear in mind something else about Esau. Ooh.
Oh,
You got to read it.
trouble in the internet universe.
Now, normally we have the Christian hecklers. Today we got a Muslim heckler. That's interesting. Okay.
That's actually-
Yeah. So, anyways, so the story goes that Rivka, that Rashi tells us something else also. Now we're mixing up a lot of Rashis of here, but Rashi tells something else also interesting.
Hashem shared
That-
the Nevuah with her, but not with Yitzchak.
That what?
The Nevuah went to her, but not to Yitzchak.
Was Yitzchak not a prophet? Of course he was a prophet.
But she wasn't allowed to share it.
Hang on a second. I was trying to share with you something else. You know what it says about Esau? What it says here about Esau is that Rashi says that Esau is the pig. Esau is represented by the pig. What's wrong with the pig? Is anything wrong with the pig?
He shows his
Trade.
shows his
and him what it's not.
Why is the pig treif? Why is the pig treif? The pig is the only animal on earth that has split hooves and does not chew the cud. The only animal on earth. That's what the Torah tells us. No other animal on earth that has a split hoof but does not chew the cud, which means on the outside, he's kosher. He looks kosher. You look at him, he's like, oh, inspection. He looks kosher. But on the inside, he's treif. So the pig is the poster child of hypocrisy, where the way you are on the outside is not the way you are on the inside. This is Esau. Very interesting. Now we've learned in previous classes that that's actually not such a terrible thing. This is faking it till you're making it, right? Which is another interesting perspective in Esau. We spend a lot of time talking about Jacob, but today I want to spend a couple minutes talking about Esau. I want to zone in on Esau. We've done a lot of chatting, learning about Rivka, about Yaakov. We've spoken about Yaakov dressing in the clothes of Esau, right? The intuition you mentioned that Rivka understood that the blessing needed to descend upon the Jewish people when they were living like Gentiles. That's like us Jews today, right? When on the outside we eat like Gentiles and we talk like Gentiles, but on the inside we're still Jewish, right? We've spoken about this a lot, but let's talk about Esau. Who was Esau? So there's a beautiful verse which I want to draw your attention to on page 157. It says this. The boys, it's verse number 27. My 3-year-old was sitting on the couch last night. Shmulik, he tells me, Tati, I was sitting on the couch and I was falling. And then Racheli grabbed me by the ankle. Yeah, by the uncle. And I didn't fall. Just like Yaakov, he says. Just like Yaakov, he says. He grabbed me by the ankle. My 3-year-old. I love that. So here's the story, right? So page 157, the first one emerged, top of the page. The first one emerged ruddy, a portent that he would be a shedder of blood and full of hair all over like a woolen cloak that is covered with hair. So everyone present at his birth called him Esav, Asui, completed. This name stuck. His brother then emerged, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel, a portent that the nation that would descend from him would rise to power on the heels of the nation that would descend from Esau. As soon as the latter's power would begin to wane, the former would wrest dominion from it. He was also grasping Esau's heel because since he was conceived first, he wanted to emerge first and receive the birthright. Interesting, right? God named this second son Jacob, which means heel, by inspiring Isaac to give him a name, recalling how he was born grasping Esau's heel. Jacob was born circumcised. Isaac was in his 60th year when Rebekah gave birth to them. 60 years old. Okay, now the boys grew. Esau became an expert in ensnaring his father into thinking that he was exceedingly pious by asking him clever questions. And now we're beginning to see how Isaac was deceived by Esau because he was a skilled hunter. Rashi explains that he would deceive his father by asking him deceitful questions. In reality, however, he was an undisciplined man who spent his time in the field hunting animals and birds. In contrast, Jacob was a guileless man, like innocent, and not pretending to be anything he was not. He went to live in the tents of Shem and Everett to study the Torah. Isaac loved Esau, both for the game he provided from his hunting, and because he was deceived by his cunning words, while Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay, that's the story I wanted to show you. So, interesting, what?
But that's the interpretation. It's not the Torah's words. The Torah's words are in the dark highlight.
In the bold.
Read that, it's a much different interpretation.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean,
So,
Jacob, Yitzhak liked him because he hunted in the field and because of his words.
yeah, what does it mean he loved him because of his cunning words? That's the question.
Okay.
Let's look at this verse. It says in Hebrew. It says, "Vayav Yitzchak et Esav kitzayid b'fiv." So Isaac loved Esau because he was cunning words. I mean, like, how do you understand that? So Rashi explains to us. What does that mean? Is that his son deceived him? That's what it means. Okay, fair enough. It doesn't say it explicitly in the verse. Fair enough. But Rashi's getting it from the oral Torah. Okay, we're going past the origins of Torah right now, right? I want to dive a little deeper into this. So Rashi explains to us that the meaning of why Isaac loved Esau is because of his cunning words. What were these cunning words? Rashi explains to us that Esau would ask Yitzchak the following questions. How do you tithe salt and straw? How do you tithe salt and straw? Which made him get the false impression that Esau was very pious. Right? Now, can you see why that would make him think that he's pious? Because he wants to know, how do you tithe salt and straw, right? But really, it doesn't really work that way because it shows actually quite the opposite. It shows his ignorance. Because everybody knows that salt and straw are exempt from tithing. We don't tithe our salt and our straw, especially if you live in Israel, by the way. If you live in Israel, it's a big deal for kosher food. The greatest concern for food being kosher is when it comes to fruits and vegetables. In America, it's more the meat. But in Israel, it's the fruit and vegetables because the fruits and vegetables need to be tithed. And you need to give the truma, which is the gift to the priests and the Levites from your tomatoes, right? And your carrots. So how do you do that? You need to make sure that the fruit has been tithed. The vegetables have been tithed. So people in Israel are very familiar with these laws. They know you don't tithe salt and you don't tithe straw. I mean, you don't eat straw. Why would you tithe it, right? So first of all, why would that be how would that be deceiving Isaac when in reality it would show his utter ignorance? And besides, if you want to tithe something, you know what tithe means? 10%.
10%.
Like what was he showing? How bad he was at math? Like, how do you tithe salt? Take 10%. You want to go above and beyond what you don't have to do, then just give 10%, and that's how you tithe it. Was this a math question? like what's going on? This is the Rebbe's question. What exactly was the message here? How was Esau deceiving Isaac? So the Rebbe therefore says that what Esau was probably doing was not following the regular laws of Meiser, of tithing, but rather he was following the footsteps of his grandfather, his illustrious grandfather Abraham, about whom we learned in Parshas Lech Lecha that after the war with the 4 kings, when Abraham was successful, what did he do? What did he do? He gave a tithe of everything that he had to Melchizedek Melech Shalem, to the Kohen. Right? So what Abraham did is that he gave a tithe from everything that he had, which was a special kind of tithe. He tithed from his entire possessions, all the spoils of war, including the salt, exactly everything, which would have showed that would have included salt and straw. In other words, the question of Esau, therefore, was not showing his ignorance of what is obligated in tithing, but rather showing his piety that I'm like my grandfather. Ah, okay, very good. So you're like Zayd, they're very impressive. Okay, we're going places. And now what's his question? How do we tithe salt and straw? Back to the math, right? You want to tithe it above and beyond the call of duty? Fantastic, 10%. You don't know how to calculate 10%? Go to math, get a tutor.
No, I don't think it was a math question. It was, how do I tithe something that isn't tithable?
Why is it not tithable?
Isn't that tithable?
You take it, you put it on a scale, you measure
have a pound-
10%, you take it off the
salt,
scale, and you're done.
No. Again, it's not a math question. It's you're saying that you don't tithe. Straw is not something that you would tithe, either with salt. So he's asking.
Why not? If you want to go the Abrahamic way, and tithe everything that you have, great. But if you're going to do that, then just take 10% of it.
Yeah, but that's his dilemma.
The 10 ducks, you give 1 duck.
Yeah, but that's his dilemma.
Why is that a dilemma? I don't understand.
Because Abraham did it, but it's not something that you do.
But
So
I'm
he's
doing it.
asking,
He said,
how
listen,
do I
I'm
do
doing
it?
it. I'm pious. So if you're pious, then take 10%. What do you have to make a big deal about this? Just give 10% and move on. Right? So the Rabbi explained that his question was different. His question was, when I tithe the salt, of course I know how to do math. I know how to separate 10%. A Jew came into my office the other day, and he told me that he opened a separate bank account. Which was, he calls it the Hashem account. And he says 10% of all of his earnings go into that account. And he tells me he sees extraordinary blessing.
That's amazing.
Extraordinary blessing from separating that 10% off the top. It's amazing. This, by the way, is just to bear in mind another connection to our parsha. No, actually last week, where it says that Yitzchak became exceedingly wealthy, right? Or is it this week's parsha? This week's parsha becomes exceedingly wealthy. Why? Because he would give a tithe. It says in the parsha, he would give a tithe. Bear that in mind. You give a tithe, you become exceedingly wealthy because God becomes your partner. That's another conversation we've had before. The question that Esau was asking was, when you tithe, do you tithe based on quantity or on impact? What does salt do? Salt in and of itself, okay, I've got a pound of salt. But you know what salt does?
Impact, it erodes.
When you put the salt into rice or into a dish, the whole dish becomes filled with flavor, right? Bear in mind, salt in and of itself is inedible, but it makes food that's hard to eat delicious. So do you judge the salt based upon its own volume, its own quantity, or do you judge the salt based upon its greater impact? So if I'm using the salt, let's say, to feed 100 people, so do I need to take off 10 portions of the food to charity, or do I need to use just 10% of the original amount? Same exact question applies to the straw. What do you do with straw? Straw in and of itself is straw, but when you use it in order to produce bricks, right? That's, I believe, how we made bricks in Egypt, right? If I remember correctly, we took the straw and we mixed it with something else. I'm no builder. What do you do with straw? You put it with cement? I don't know. You mix it with something, right? Mud maybe, and then you leave it out in the sun. It gives a texture, right? The straw gives a texture to the mud maybe, and you bake it in the hot Egyptian sun, and it becomes a brick probably, right? So the question is, do you tie the straw based upon its volume right now, or do you tie the straw based upon its greater impact when you mix it together with the substance that it's becoming, right? And this was the question of Esau. How do you tithe salt and straw based upon their own value or based upon their impact? And this is how he was trying to deceive his father, to show him how meticulous he is in the observance of mitzvahs. And indeed, that is the reason why Isaac wanted a blessing. Does that answer that question?
And why is it a deception?
Because he wasn't really pious.
He wasn't really planning on doing any tithing.
He wasn't planning on doing any tithing. So he was lying.
Say that.
Where does it say that? We just read it over here. He was a hunter. He was a skilled hunter. He was deceiving his father. That's what it says in the verse. He's used his words to deceive his father. In fact, I'll prove it to you, by the way. You would think that you have an answer here, that now we understand why Isaac was deceived. But if you remember what happens later on, when Jacob comes in to his father and he says, hey, Dad, I brought the food that you requested. I'm ready for you to bless me. And he asks him, he says, how did you come back so quickly? So Jacob, dressed in the clothes of Esau, responds and he says, "Oh, Hashem help me. Hashem help me." So Isaac's like, "What? Who are you?" Because he knew.
You have the voice of.
No, but not just the voice of Jacob, but even the words of Jacob. Because Shem Shamayim Shagur Befiv, the name of God was frequent in the mouth of Jacob, but it was not frequent. It was never heard in the mouth of Esau. So this is the first red flag for Isaac. And that's why he says, "Come, let me feel you. Who are you? I feel like you're an imposter because the person you say that you are doesn't speak this way." So in other words, Yitzchak was well aware that Esau doesn't mention God. So what kind of deceit is this at all? And here the Rabbi gives us the deeper insight. Here the Rabbi tells us that in truth, Yitzchak knew exactly who Esau was. Yitzchak understood that Esau is a man who does not mention the name of God. He understood that this is a deceitful and cunning hunter. He knew that he was a wicked man. But he also saw that Yitzchak had a profoundly powerful soul root. Because Yitzchak understood the law of the roller coaster. The higher you are, the lower you fall. What Rashi was telling us first in, last out. The higher you are, the lower you fall. Life is a pendulum. If you start very far to the right, you'll end up very far to the left. If you start up higher in heaven, you will descend lower in this world. So when he sees somebody who is exceedingly wicked, Yitzchak perceived, he saw, not just the superficial perception of a wicked man, of an anti-Semite, the guy who became the first anti-Semite who wanted to kill Jacob. And that's next week's Torah portion. But here he perceived what lay behind the superficial perception. He saw the powerful soul root of this special man, realizing that at his core, he was exceedingly powerful. Give an example. So when Adam names the animals, well, there's a debate, there's an argument with God and the angels. And the angels are like, why? They say to God, why would you create man? Like, really? Why would you create man? So God says, because his wisdom is greater than yours, he says to the angels. Really? Says the angel, why is the wisdom of man greater than our wisdom? Well, let's see, says God, if you can name the animals. God asks the angels to name the animals. They can't. Only Adam is able to name the animals. Now, why is it such a big deal to name the animals? If you have a Sharpie and a little sticker, you can name all the animals, right? Cow, donkey, pig, right? You could do it. What's the big deal? Because the naming of animals is not just a label, it's a code. Our Hebrew names is an HTML code. Our Hebrew names is not like our English, not like a random label. It is the root of our soul, of which our parents are conscious or subconscious at the time of our namings. So our parents name us without them even being aware of why they're drawn to a particular name, because they sense the root of our souls, our destiny, and that's why they pick a name like Jonathan and not David, Rachel and not Leah. Why do they like this name and not like that name? You think it's because, some sort of fashion, something. No, it's because destiny has led you towards that particular name. Because Adam, or all human beings, are able to sense. Adam was conscious of it. Irregular parents are not conscious of it. But Adam was able to sense not only what he saw, but also the root of that which lay behind it. And that's why he sees a cow and he's like, oh, this is a pei reish hey, it's a para. And he sees the donkey and he says, this is a chet mem vav reish, it's a chamor. Right? And he sees his wife and he says, this is an aleph shin hey, isha. Right? Because she comes from ish. He was able to connect the root with the manifestation. To say one connects to two. This is the greatness of Adam, which is much more than the angels. Angels are purely spiritual. Human beings straddle both lanes. Human beings are spiritual and physical at the same time. The word Adam means Adama, earth. And at the same time, the word Adam means Adameh le'elyon, I resemble my maker. Because a human being is an angel stuffed into a sack. A human being is a beauty living together with the beast in the palace. That's what a human being is. You got a beauty and the beast, and you got to figure it out together. You got to get along with each other. So what happens here is that Isaac, instead of a very shallow reading of the parsha where we're reading, we're like, oh, I guess Isaac was senile. He lost his marbles. He couldn't tell right from wrong. He could no longer discern between the wicked and the righteous, between Haman and Mordechai. That's what it looks like in a very shallow reading of the Bible. But when you're able to put in your X-ray vision, your Hasidus glasses, you're able to see that Isaac was a giant of the world. He was a patriarch of our nation, fully conscious and aware in a manner which we can't even process. And when he sees his son Esau, the first anti-Semite in Jewish history, what does he see? He sees a confused soul, a soul which is exceedingly powerful. A soul that has descended into a particularly dark descent. And that's specifically the reason why Isaac wants to bless Esau. Why does he want to bless him? Because he wants to endow him with the power to uncover his latent potential, that which doesn't come to the fore. And in fact, the Rebbe points out, this is the reason why his questions manifested in salt and straw. Because just like salt and straw on a superficial level, they're useless, at least for human consumption. Look at salt, it's inedible. Have you tried eating salt? Can't. Straw, same thing, it's inedible. But they carry within them great potential when used effectively as a global impact. Their impact is far, far greater than their weight in salt. That's the expression, right? Their impact is far greater than their weight in salt, much more than their peers. They're able to bring flavor or bring texture to something way beyond their own capacity. That, says the Rebbe, is the reason why he was asking these questions. As a Freudian slip, a profoundly spiritual Freudian slip that manifested his own confused soul identity. It's interesting. When we're reading the beginning of the parsha, Rivka was very upset with her pregnancy. She was very, very not upset. She was very perturbed about her pregnancy. You read about this? She has this pregnancy, and the kid wants to come out to a house of idolatry. When she walks by, house of idolatry, gets so excited, starts kicking. And then when she walks by a house of monotheism, the kid is also kicking. It's like, what kind of confused soul is this? She's very confused. So she goes to the sages, the seers of the time, Shem and Aver, and they tell her, actually, it's not one, you got two in there. You got twins. And there are two great nations. One is going to be a monotheist, one is going to be a pagan, a polytheist. And she's put at ease, right? Now let me ask you a question. Esau, is that fair? Is that fair that in utero the kid is already destined for evil? I mean, how is that fair? Give the guy a chance. Let him get born. Let him figure it out on the playground, in the schoolyard, and try to figure out how he wants to live his life. But it's almost like it was predestined in utero before he's even conscious. He's already kicking to go into a house of paganism. That's not even fair. It's like his free choice is taken away almost, is what it sounds like. The Rebbe explains that the fact that he was kicking for idolatry shows that he had a proclivity for evil. That didn't make him a bad kid. It just meant that he was destined for a greater descent, a greater darkness, a greater challenge in this world, which proved that his soul was particularly more powerful than his peer, Jacob. That's what it means. Think about a person who's born in utero, and God knows that this particular person is going to be born into a family which is going to lead him to a path of addiction. Think about that. Think of how God knows that a certain soul is going to be subject to abusive parenting. How's that even fair? Well, the way we look at it is that if God chose this particular soul to suffer that kind of suffering, that kind of challenge, it means that soul has been endowed with extraordinary powers more than its peers, which were not subject to that particular challenge. And this is how Isaac sees reality. Isaac sees the bigger picture. He says, look, right in front of me, superficial, one-dimensional view. I see a righteous scholar and I see a wicked hunter. Okay, but let's look at the bigger picture. Here you got an average soul. It's Jacob. He's holding the heel, follower, and now I got an Esau. This is a giant. What this means is that if Esau would have done teshuvah, you know what would have happened to him? He would have been a far greater Jew than Jacob was. That's what I mean.
But the question is, how often does that deranged or messed up soul ever manifest itself?
How often does that happen?
I mean, right.
Well, I think
maybe Hitler really had a good soul in him. I mean,
right.
It's
a tough question. It's a very tough question.
I mean,
so now we're going to reinterpret every anti-Semite. We're going to say, okay, the squad must be really powerful people,
right.
Very spiritual. We should engage with them. Right? That's what it seems to imply. Look, obviously, so bear this in mind. Bear this in mind that Tanya is the book of ordinary people, right? Ordinary people, Beinonim, right, who are supposed to engage with the permissible and are not supposed to engage with the forbidden. Tanya explains. Why is it called forbidden? Because the word forbidden means chained or locked up or unredeemable, irredeemable, right? Essentially, it is redeemable, just that you don't have the keys. But there's another book that the Alter Rebbe wrote. It's called the Sefer Shel Tzadikim, the book of the perfectly righteous. And that book was burned, by the way, in a fire. Why was it burned in a fire? Because it's not relevant to us. Most of us don't have a need for that book. This is who Yitzchak is. Yitzchak is perfectly righteous, and the perfectly righteous are able to have the keys to engage with that which is forbidden, that which is chained, that which is locked up to normal, regular people like us, and they are able to turn them around. So in other words, it takes a Rebbe to be able to see Esau and say, you know what, I see the good in you, I'm going to bless you. But the rest of us, we can't take that approach. But at least we can be conscious of it. And when we see a giant like Isaac, instead of dismissing him as somebody that was out of touch, we rather see that this is someone that is out of our reach. And what is the ultimate destiny here? The ultimate purpose of Isaac's blessing was he was hoping that Esau would be able to do teshuvah as empowered by the blessings that he was going to endow upon him, to connect Esau with his soul root and be able to turn him into a righteous Baal Teshuvah, which then would cause him to be on the same page as Jacob. They could feed off each other's positive energies and they could bring Mashiach. Rivka understood that this is a fantastic idea, but are not happening now. Not for a couple thousand years. It's going to take longer. So whereas Isaac might have been more academic about it, more idealistic, Rivka was more practical and more realistic. She understood that this was going to take some time. But when the two of them engage in next week's Torah portion, and when Esau and Yaakov finally make up, when they kiss each other, later on when Jacob returns from Haran with his wives and children and they finally make up, what then happens is that Esau tells them, let me send my men with you and let's travel together. But Yaakov says, I can't do that. I'll meet you one day. It's going to take some time. Yaakov, like his mother Rivka, understood that Esau wasn't ready for a tikkun right now, but with the coming of Mashiach, with the coming of Mashiach, when the root will be able to ultimately shine within the manifestation, what will happen with the coming of Mashiach is that the hidden will come to be revealed. Just like the splitting of the Red Sea, when the seabed, which is normally covered, came to be revealed, so too, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, like the waters cover the seabed. The word of God is in everything. I was talking to the chef yesterday from the New Kosher restaurant in West Palm Beach. I asked him, what's the motivation behind the master? Right? What motivates you? What's your philosophy? What's your meditation? He tells me that the energy in the tomato is the same energy in you and in me. I said, you mean God? He says, yes, Hashem Echad. God is everywhere. We pick the finest ingredients and we bring all the energies together. To be able to manifest the godliness is hidden all around us, but our goal is to be able to reveal the godliness in this world. When we as Jews reveal the godliness in the world all around us, in our bank accounts we give the 10%, and in our dining rooms we make kosher meals, and in our kitchens it's kosher, our bedrooms are kosher, and every part of our lives are kosher. When we use our cell phones for kosher, we use our TVs for kosher, then what happens is that we're actually revealing God in this world. And as we reveal God in this world, what that manifests in is that the Gentiles around us also reveal their soul root, which is not just holy and pure, it's even more holy and pure than our soul root. Right? In a sense, because remember, if they descended lower, then they originate from higher. And that's a very powerful concept to reflect on, to see the bigger picture, to see the world from the eyes of Isaac. And when we're able to do that, that's when we're able to reach a state of Mashiach, where Esau comes home. All of humanity is able to recognize Hashem will be a king over the entire world. On that day, Hashem Echad, God will be one, Shmo Echad, not just for the Jewish people, God will be one, but for all of humanity. And look what's happening in the world today. We suffered terribly from the Christians over a couple thousand years. It was brutal and bloody. It was terrible. But today, when you look at the Christians, at least in America, I was at this dinner last night at Mar-a-Lago, and there was, there were some Christians over there, and they were speaking with such passion about the Jewish people, with such passion about the land of Israel. You want to know who believes that the land of Israel belongs to the Jews? You talk to the evangelicals. Those guys, oh my gosh, they're so passionate about it. This is the power of Esau, which is even more powerful than the Jewish power. Think about it. Their passion is even more intense than our own. And there's something to be learned from that, because Esau's soul root is even higher. God willing, all the Christians will be able to join in this revolution of recognizing the creator of the universe, and God willing, the Muslims as well, and we'll be able to reach a state where there will be no more suffering, no more loneliness, no more hate. We'll be able to experience only the revelation of Hashem. Yeah.
So Esau was the lesser of the two, if you will, right? But
Esau,
Isaac,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Esau, right?
But
But
Isaac,
Isaac-
the lesser the
Well,
Superficially.
superficially, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But Isaac saw that he had a stronger, deeper soul, right, than Jacob. So is that a unique situation, unique to Jacob, or is that a principle that we should
It's a
apply?
principle we should apply.
We should
Chassidus
apply.
teaches
We should
us.
always think
I want to tell you,
that the lesser, worser person has a deeper.
yes,
better soul.
exactly. Let me give an example.
Wow.
So it's a wow moment. It is a wow. So for example, there's 4 strata in creation. There is the inanimate, the flora, the fauna. Flora is flowers, right? Flora, the vegetable kingdom, the fauna, the animal kingdom, and then the medaber, the speaker, the human kingdom, right? 4 strata. Who's the highest? Man. We are the cherry on top. We're the selective creation. Chassidus tells us, actually, you're not. Because if in this world you're the highest, it means that in heaven you're the lowest. And that's the reason, the Alter Rebbe says, why food nourishes us. Food is able to give us energy and strength. Animals and flowers and inanimate are able to give us energy and strength because their soul root is higher than our own. And the analogy given in Chassidus is of a wall that falls. When a wall falls over, the higher the bricks are, the further they fall away. The bricks that are closest are the ones that were in the lowest part of the wall. Right? Same thing with, it's just like that Jacob and Esau fallopian tube analogy from Rashi, right? That you got to see things from an X-ray perspective. And this is the genius of Isaac. Now, admittedly, it's an aspiration. It's very difficult to look at every anti-Semite with awe and say, I'm so impressed with your hate. It's very, we have so much respect. You must be a very lofty soul. It's very difficult. And that's not for us, quite frankly. It's not for us. It's for the tzaddikim. It's for the Isaacs of our times to be able to do that. For us, normal people, ordinary people, not normal, ordinary. It's at least an aspiration for us to be conscious and aware of that. Sometimes we think to ourselves that the way I see things is like perfection. The way my worldview is correct. And if anybody disagrees with my worldview, then they're just simply wrong, right? This is how many of us live our lives, right? But at least as Jews studying Torah, we can have the humility to realize, stay in your lane. Recognize that you're very limited and you're just an ordinary person. Calm down, relax. And if somebody has a different opinion, they might actually be right and you might actually be wrong because they might see things in a totally more elevated perception than you possibly could ever see. Go.
And what would have happened, do you think, if Isaac would have blessed Esau?
Oh, I want to tell you one more thing. Okay. All right. If Isaac would have blessed Esau, let's talk about this. If Isaac would have blessed Esau, then Esau would have been empowered to hitch the carriage with the what's the first train called? The locomotive. To catch the carriage of the locomotive, and his carriage might have sped out to the destination. In other words, Esau would potentially, I think Isaac's intention, the way I understand it is that Yitzchak was trying to bring Mashiach. He was trying to reach a stage where America stands up to the world and moves the embassy to Jerusalem, where America says we're making peace between the Jews and the Muslims, the Abraham Accords, right? We're going to help Israel. We're going to defend Israel. We're sending fighter jets to Israel. We're sending weapons to Israel. We're allowing Israel to defend itself. We're vetoing in the United Nations. What Isaac was trying to do is to have Esau do that. Then I believe we're on the threshold of redemption.
And what would have been wrong with that?
The world wasn't ready.
The Holocaust and Rabbi.
That's why now you understand. Until now, we constantly have been saying, I'm so glad you said that. Because until now, for years, we've been saying Rivka sees the light and Isaac just seems to have missed the mark. But now you finally turned it around. I'm so glad you said that. Why did Rivka have to mess it up? Why do you have to get involved? Stay out of this. Let Isaac do his thing and avoid the Holocaust and the Crusades and all the murders and all the blood and all the intifadas. We could have just had a beautiful life. We could have gone straight into Mashiach. Now the question's on Rivka. Oh, now we're ready to read the portion again. This is where I was going. We flipped the whole story. Beautiful. So what's the answer?
What's wrong with it?
So here we go back.
So
here we go back and we say, we begin to understand. I feel like kids that are watching mom and dad having a discussion about where we should go and, what we should do, how we spend the money, where we go on holiday, which house we should buy. And the kids that don't have a clue. So they're like, I want that house because it's got nice colors, right? They don't understand the argument, right? We're starting as kids 3,000 years later to understand what mom and dad were talking about, what Isaac and Rivka, these giants of history, were talking about. Isaac wants to avoid the suffering.
So
Rivka says, it's not practical. It's not going to happen. Maybe Rivka understood, perhaps. Rivka understood that it might go awry. The plan might backfire. Where Esau, empowered with these blessings, the carriage doesn't connect to the locomotive, and now the carriage has got nuclear power, and it's going to go in the wrong direction with way too much energy. Maybe that's what she understood. Maybe he'll be empowered to become a worse anti-Semite than he ever was destined to become. Because of these blessings, there's too much energy into an irresponsible place. Too much risk. You see, perhaps that was the argument. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
She wanted Esau would have made teshuvah had he been blessed.
That's what Isaac was hoping for. But Rebecca understood maybe not. And I want to close with one mind-blowing point to answer your question. Maybe. This is what I've been meditating on the past days. Maybe, just maybe, the debate between Isaac and Rivka, was that Isaac didn't believe that suffering was a good thing. And Rivka did. When Joseph is sold as a slave by his own brothers, the Torah uses a very interesting word, which actually makes a lot of sense. V'Yosef hurad Mitzrayma. And Joseph was made to go down to Egypt. It's an interesting tense. Hurad, he was forced to go down because he was sent, right? He was sent down to Egypt. The Rebbe explains that word hurad, which makes sense, he was sent down to Egypt. And which other word are you going to use, right? That the word hurad is related to a word in Tehillim. I forget which chapter. Yifrach b'yom of tzaddik. You know which chapter it is? Yifrach b'yom of tzaddik. You're talking about Mashiach. And it says over there, V'yered miyom ad yom. And he will rule from coast to coast. The word rule is v'yered. And he will rule, just like we say, not the word. The word yerd, yud, resh, daled, that same root, can mean fall, or it can mean rule, dominate. So the Rebbe interprets Joseph was made to descend to Egypt to mean, and Joseph was made to dominate over Egypt. In other words, the purpose of our suffering, the purpose of our darkness, the purpose of our trials, tribulations, and obstacles and challenges is in order for us to ultimately dominate over them, in order to engage with the darkness and to transform it into light. So whereas Isaac said, no, thank you, like your approach, and you're like, I didn't even understand this. Why would you even want this? This makes no sense. You're Isaac. Whereas Rivka is coming more the approach that I'm espousing, which is, I know you can't understand this, but I know you love me, so take it from me, says Rivka to Isaac, right? I think it's a good idea for them to suffer 3,500 years. And now we can begin to understand, Rob, perhaps why Rivka doesn't actually confront Isaac in conversation, but resorts rather to deception, which says, you know what, there is no way in hell that this is ever going to go over in a conversation. I have no choice but to deceive my husband. Because it's the deeper interpretation of why Isaac is deceived by his son Esau, the first anti-Semite in history. And realizing that perhaps he wasn't deceived at all, and that Isaac knew full good and well who he was talking to and what he was intending, that we begin to understand the great debate that raged amongst the giants of our people. A lot to meditate upon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Cool.
Amazing.
So when that